All right, recording with Rochelle Byrne from A Greener Future over in Ontario. How's it going over there?
I'm great. How are you?
Can't complain on Vancouver Island. Even in this sort of situation, it's not a bad place to be anytime though.
Yeah. It's sunny here, but it's still pretty cold. I wouldn't want to be sitting outside right now.
Well, it's warmer outside for me than it is inside right now, which is I guess strange. But
Yeah.
yeah, what did you guys get up to for Earth Day yesterday then?
We kind of kept it a little on the down low since we do Earth Day basically every day. Um, we did we did tune into Earth Day Live for a little bit, and we watched some environmentally inspired documentaries. We got outside for a walk, and just talked. I have a 4-year-old son, so we talked about a lot of things that relate to the earth and nature, and got ready to plant some seeds and that kind of thing.
Nice. So actually, just before we pressed record, we were talking about how many years you've been going, and you said 5, and you have a 4-year-old son. So you were
Yeah,
actually pregnant with your son when you started this organization.
exactly. I actually I got pregnant about, it was probably about 4 months after I officially started the organization.
Nice. And then just
Yeah,
power through, and while he was
yeah,
a baby and toddler and everything, been there by your side while you built this organization.
yeah. It's actually been a pretty big inspiration for me because I feel like now I'm doing it for him, not just for myself and the people of this generation, but I have a specific reason to help the next generation. So he's been great because I can teach him and I can learn from him, and um, it's kind of funny because I definitely didn't expect to be running a nonprofit and having a baby at the same time.
Nice.
But it worked out pretty well in my favor.
Yeah, I think that with everyone, there's always some sort of motivation. Obviously, it was there before, and that's what you were getting it up and going. But it's great to have that inspiration, right? And I feel that that's what keeps people going in the long term. It's not just a flash in the pan. And personally, for myself, as coming from a marine background, it was just being so in touch with the ocean, and seeing the footprint so effectively. And that was my backyard. That's where I lived and
Mhm.
breathed every single day. So everyone's got something different, but I can just imagine like having this little human like going through all the wonderment phases of learning about everything, and it would just keep you going every single day if that's your whole life, right?
Yeah. And it was a great test too, because for us being new parents and tackling things like uh, feeding them healthy things and diapering and that kind of thing, we always tried to do the most sustainable option and the healthiest option. So it gave me a lot of fuel to keep a greener future going and to keep learning and sharing and talking about what I was discovering kind of along the way.
Exactly, and that I think it's always a personal journey for most people, and that's how organizations grow, right? And like you're saying, there's so many different sides. It's not just a cleanup aspect. There's responsible choices we can all make. So, as a new parent, you start looking for those alternatives, and luckily, I think that's one of the silver linings we have, not just with this time with COVID, but we actually live in a time where, yeah, we've realized the problem of all this trash that's out there in our waterways, and the effects of it, how it's not just a physical thing in the way, but we've got all this innovation going on, and whether that's more plant-based or compostable like nappy, or plastic alternatives, which nothing is the silver bullet solution yet, but we're seeing all these things change. So it's nice to ride that wave. Sadly, we still have to go and clean up other people's trash,
Mm-hmm.
which
We do.
I do a lot of. I'm actually going to go into a screen share now, and we're going to look at some of the links that you sent forward.
Yeah, sure.
So I just have to figure out where that button is again. There we go, green one. It's weird. I haven't done one of these for a week, so I forget where everything is. All right, so this is your website, and what I like there is, speaking of picking up other people's trash, even though you'd way rather probably focus on being a mom and celebrating all the great solutions of minimizing your waste, but your organization has actually picked up over 1.5 or close to 1.5 million pieces of other people's litter.
Yes, we have.
That's insane.
It is. And it's crazy because when I first started, my goal was to pick up 1 million pieces of litter. Originally, I grew up in the Bob Cajun area, so I hosted a litter cleanup in a tiny, tiny town. There's about 2,500 residents that live in Bob Cajun. So I hosted a litter cleanup, and I soon realized that one cleanup is not enough. Every time I went down to the beach, there was more litter to pick up. So I set a goal for myself to pick up 1 million pieces of litter. And I had no intention of starting a nonprofit at that point. I was working for the college that I graduated, and I was traveling around to high schools to do presentations. And everywhere I went, I would go do a litter cleanup, and I'd post it on my social media. And soon enough, I got people that wanted to come out and join me, or people that wanted to buy me supplies. And it kind of just blossomed from there. Um, it was probably about a few months and a few thousand pieces in that I decided that maybe there was a need to turn this into something bigger. So that's when I started to look into starting a nonprofit, and making it something that seemed a little bit more legitimate than just me going around and picking up garbage.
Absolutely. And I think I see a lot of success stories with whatever it is, whether it's a product innovation or a grassroots org, where it essentially started as a side hustle. And that's kind of what it was. I mean, you're going around, you're doing these things just because you felt it was important. And I know personally, when I started in this field, I didn't want to have an organization. I never wanted to be an ED of a charity. Like, I was just a captain that wanted to help. And
Hmm.
just the more you get integrated and the more you see opportunities or a need, then yeah, you start crossing the T's and dotting the I's. But I think the most successful people are the ones that stay in it the longest. It was really just, it's never like you wake up one morning, you're like, I'm going to go and register, not for profit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Start for a little while. Um,
Yeah.
Before we go into some of the media or your social channels, is there anything you wanted to walk us through on your website? I guess maybe, I mean, we can talk about how people can get engaged at the closer, but considering I'm not Joe Rogan, I don't know how many people are going to really watch this. So let's get it out of the way in the beginning. So if you go to your website, agreenerfuture.ca, people can get involved. How? See, you've got a programs list here. Is that
Yeah, so that highlights all the programs that we run. They happen at different times of the year for the most part. Um, and yeah, so right now, what we were supposed to be coming up to was Love Your Lake. It was supposed to start on May 2nd, but we're pushing it forward, and hopefully we'll be able to complete it this year. If not, it will go ahead next year. It's a program we've been running. This would be our 5th year running it. And we do 100 cleanups along the shorelines of Lake Ontario. So we start at one end of the lake and we go all along to the other. It takes about 2 months. And some of those cleanups are public cleanups, so anyone can register online and join us.
There we go.
And then some of the cleanups are team cleanups. So with that, sometimes it's just the Greener Future team if it's a smaller or more remote area. And sometimes we work with school groups or companies, local businesses, and they'll send out employees or even like Girl Guides and that type of thing, where we'll have like a community group come out and join us.
I think that's one of the best things about focusing on one area, like really quantify what you've got in your backyard. And 100 cleanups is no small feat. And
Yeah.
the fact that like you're just listed off, whether it's schools or corporate groups or open volunteer, that is so much organizing for somebody that just thinks it's a good idea. Like so much goes into this. It's a full year of planning from the day you finish, really, to make sure it's successful the next year. But
Yeah.
that's insane. And I just think that it's perfect because focus on Lake Ontario. It's achievable. It's like, you can actually show the numbers. You can get data on which areas are affected the most. You can you can get public engagement where there it may be a little bit busier, and there might be, say, a marina or a community in one of the sort of rural areas, and then also access the sort of uninhabited or remote shorelines of that lake and see what's happening there. So,
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the really interesting things we found with our data. When you think of where you're going to find garbage, you think of cities and places where there's a lot of people.
Mhm.
But out of those 100 locations, there's not one location that we didn't find garbage, even if it is remote. So I think what the data shows us is that the composition of the litter in different areas is different.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to find as much fast food in places outside of the cities,
Mhm.
but you're still going to find a lot of stuff, whether that's washed up debris, or shotgun shell wads, or there's a ton of different things we found 6 toilet seats, so who knows where they're coming from, but that's the kind of stuff we find in more remote areas.
Yeah, and like with coming from the background of uninhabited remote islands, like that's where the topic really hit home for me. So it never was the fast food wrappers. It never, it wasn't cigarette butts and such. It was remote uninhabited shorelines, and they're heavily affected. So even on a lake, and I love how you've actually got your results and your reports from every year, because it shows the difference or what's happening, whether it's getting better or worse, or that it's consistently showing up. And yeah, like the fact that it's lakes, we get a lot of kickback having the name plastic oceans, especially mainly from Alberta. I think on people in Ontario like understand Great Lakes are almost like a mini ocean, and like they know that it's affected. But yeah, in other landlocked provinces, they seem to say, "Oh, it's not a problem for here." Well, all water flows to the sea, right? And
Yeah.
it's all interconnected. But yeah. So if anyone wants to see your progress reports, it's great that you've got them year by year, and hopefully there are some results for 2020. I think I'm positively optimistic that we will be able to domestically travel, or at least within our own province, be able to get out if they just want to kind of create some sort of containment between the provinces, so we can't spread anything. Which is
Yeah.
fortunate for Andy Sward, who wanted to run across the country for his 4th time. Which is funny, you picked the million pieces of litter thing, because he picked million bottle pledge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think everyone just throws that arbitrary number out there. It's like, it's a big goal, so we're just going to say I'm going to pick up a million,
Yeah.
see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
um,
It's something that you think maybe you can achieve, but it will take some effort. But I was actually really surprised when we got to a million. It was much later than I had expected,
yeah.
because it does take a long time to pick up that much garbage, especially when it's winter here half the time and we can't get out because everything's buried. Um, but
The
the
thing is,
one,
when it's snowing and people are still littering, and then once it melts off, then it's like you almost
yeah,
set out and just.
there's a ton. Yeah. Yeah. But the funny enough, the 1 millionth piece was picked up at our 100th cleanup at the end of Love Your Lake last year.
I love synergy like that, where it's just
Yeah.
millions on the 100.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a great finale.
Right. But it also took a lot of people. I mean, have you actually quantified how many people engaged with the organization to hit that million mark?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For the first, like in 2014, it was basically just me and maybe a friend that would come out with me. So there wasn't that much visibility for a greener future then. But over the years, we've built up our volunteer base. And now we have about 500 volunteers that come out annually to help.
Nice.
Yeah.
And have you ever heard of, I think it's Aniela Guzikowski? She did a TEDx on the same conference that I did my last one on. She's about 12 years old out here in BC, and did a big cigarette butt campaign as well.
Oh, awesome.
Or if you've ever heard of her,
No.
but just like yourself, like got interested in it. She actually works with her hatchery in Port Moody, if you know where that is. It's kind of like
Hmm.
outside a big inlet by Vancouver, and was just volunteered every Sunday at the hatchery to make sure that the salmon could stay alive, and then started noticing cigarette butts, and then went on this massive campaign. So I have to link you two up, because
Yeah. That'd be
she's great. She is getting sick of cleaning up other people's cigarette
awesome.
butts,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you
Yeah.
are as well. But has had some good media on that topic. So you've got the Butt Blitz. I know you were applying for some grants on this one as well. And tell us a little bit about the Butt Blitz.
Yeah, so that was actually one of my first campaigns, because when I started picking up litter, cigarette butts were one of the top things that I was collecting. So I realized that's a huge issue, and I developed the Butt Blitz campaign, which is one day in the spring where everyone goes out and picks up cigarette butt litter. And then we send it to TerraCycle so that it can be recycled. So we've run this. This would have been our 6th year running the campaign. We had to cancel it for obvious reasons, but I was still able to go out, and we had have a few close volunteers that went out, and we made sure that we had gloves and litter pickers and could stay a safe distance from people. So I think we picked up around 10,000, which is a lot less than previous years, but it's something.
Yeah.
Usually we host this
We've
across
got more.
Canada. Yeah, yeah. We host it across Canada. So we'll have coordinators set up in different cities, and
Right.
then volunteers can come out and get some gloves and pick up what they can. And then we send it all in to TerraCycle afterwards.
Beautiful. And it's great.
Yeah.
That's another thing, going back to, like you're saying, being a new mother and finding all these different solutions is, you know, it's great to have companies like TerraCycle that are proven now. You know, like when they first got up and going, it was kind of a concept and great visionary founder. I mean, Tom, like, just kind of put his head down and forced some of these things to happen, you know, as far as, like, you know, putting a value to chip packets and such, or cigarette butts. And
Hmm.
now that they've been able to get through proof of concept, you know, these are actual solutions where people, if people are clean, you're no longer just cleaning up other people's irresponsible cigarette butts. You know, it can actually go somewhere and become something as a second life product, or be disposed of responsibly. uh,
Exactly.
is there another sort of program, I guess, sup with litter, or do you want to go through zero
Yeah.
101?
So Sup with Litter is actually a new program that we were planning on starting this year. So it's not off to a great start, but it is something that we're going to still try and do and just make accommodations. So the idea was that we would run our regular Love Your Lake program, where we start in Niagara on the Lake on one end and go to Kingston. And then we were going to paddleboard back. So it's about 420 kilometers along the lake. And our goal was to do about 30 kilometers per day and have different stand-up paddleboarding athletes that are in the area kind of take the lead, and we'd pick up garbage along the way, and also raise money for our program. So we're going to have to do it a bit differently. We hoped that people could come out and paddleboard with us, and that we'd be able to host some cleanups on the land as well as we get to different checkpoints.
Yeah.
But I think we'll still end up paddleboarding, and hopefully maybe do like a live stream or something like that to
Yeah.
make it more virtual. But yeah, we'll hopefully have a better go at it next year.
Well, yeah, I mean, the world, who knows what's going to be happening this summer, but you know, it's not even summer yet. And
Yeah.
things, like, even if they do lock off the provinces, I mean, if the numbers are somewhat contained around Ontario, and, you know, maybe able to still do a relay, I mean, I'd love to try to get the word out for you through whatever channels. I know our international office has just a larger sort of following. It might just prompt people to get out, but even if you can't, and it's just sort of a relay where it's one athlete to one athlete, even if you're just documenting it, you know, so
Hmm.
some of these places that aren't road access, you know where to go, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
once things
Exactly.
open up. So we can always find like a positive, but again, another hugely positive effort here. And I love how there's always a structure, you know, like it's actually going to get it done properly, and they all sort of coincide, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
and that's the thing. Like for me, when I first started A Greener Future, I didn't know what to expect. I don't have a business background. I went to environmental school. So when it came to the business side of things, I was a little bit lost at first, but I knew if I just didn't give up and just keep going, then something's going to happen. So,
I
I
mean,
mean,
cool.
even in tough times, like you just keep going.
Yeah, your organization's only been going for 5 years, and most people sit in a classroom for 5 years learning business. And I mean, 100%, you're going to be, you know, we've had just a few emails back and forth, and I think only one phone call, but you definitely got enough business savvy, that more than somebody that sat in a classroom and got a piece of paper. You know, I didn't know anything about it. I knew how to navigate by stars.
Yeah, yeah.
Learning about who not to trust, and, you know, like, but
Hmm.
that whole experience came up in developing islands. I only came back to Canada like a year and a half ago, so that's been a huge learning curve of actually learning, you know, not being in places where there's corruption and other things going on. So,
Hmm.
you know, you just learn.
Yeah.
And I think
A lot
that,
of trial and error.
exactly, and also not tearing yourself apart when something doesn't work, because lots of things don't work. You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
you got to keep picking up the pieces and carrying on and learning from the mistakes. You know, there's a lot
Hmm.
of success and failure, and there's so many good quotes out there that, you know, like, you can't be an expert unless you've failed like 1,000 times, right? Because
Yeah, exactly.
that's how you become the expert. If
Yeah.
everything just falls into place, you don't grow as a person, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got Zero Waste 101. You've got a lot going on, but I love how they're so pointed and they make sense on how they actually overlap. But and also it's such a great website about, it's very clean and presented well. So there's a lot of good stuff on here for people if they want to know about zero waste.
Yeah. And
Uh,
that's kind of just an ongoing program. It's something people can kind of check into. We're going to keep creating videos, and it's just the basics of reducing waste, because the more waste we reduce, the less is going to end up on the ground that we have to pick up later. Right.
Absolutely. I mean, the number one R for most people should be refuse.
Hmm. Yeah.
Again, we're learning. You know,
Hmm.
when I were kids, like, it was recycle, reduce, reuse. And now we know if you just refuse it at
Yeah,
the beginning,
exactly.
then we're kind of that, I guess, 10 steps ahead, right?
Yep. Yep.
You're no stranger to a little bit of media. I've got the links that you sent over. Can we start with words of wisdom? I'm just gonna.
Yeah, sure.
So I love this how it starts out. You know, you basically just got some courage and asked someone who might have some answers, and then it led into one of your closest friendships and colleagues.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's one of the best things about running a greener future is the people I've met along the way.
Mhm.
Because when you post a litter cleanup to the public, the people that are coming are usually people that are already sort of environmentally minded, unless they're being dragged along by a family member or friend. Um, so
We need those though.
yeah,
It,
yeah.
do you not get frustrated sometimes? You're like, I'm just preaching to the converted. If you're reading this, you probably already follow that.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I totally get that. But it's really nice to make those connections with people who are actually really trying to make a difference. And it's inspiring. And I love that I can, share that connection with people. And I have made a lot of friendships. And even on Instagram, there's a lot of accounts where I haven't even met the people in person, but we have really good conversations. So it's it's a great community to be in.
It's just like-minded folks, you know. And I think I love a lot of friendships that formed before I got into this. But I find I really like my work colleagues as well, or just sort of those relationships that you form. And and I don't really use social media a lot privately, but it is just for friends, you know. Like,
Yeah.
that's the friendship side, that's the little, like, quirky sense of humor, and then there's the work side, and I try not to let the worlds cross over, right?
Hmm.
Because they're
Yep.
two very, very different things. And sometimes, you know, you meet people and they want to come and help out, but I found really early on that, you know, someone would be like, oh, you're working on this, I want to help out, and then it just became frustrating, and it drove a wedge in the friendship. So if you just leave it, and if they
Yeah. Yep.
want to get involved, they're going to get involved, you
Yep.
know. But yeah, it's almost easier to just form new relationships when you get into these sorts of things, and I think that goes for any business. You know, a lot of people have to learn, you know, business is not your personal life.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
you can become friendly with people you work with and do business with, but, you know, you can kind of leave it there.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
I love, I always love anything that says trash talk, because first got into this, I was really just thought we could work on, like, you know, gasifying waste plastics to alternative fuels, closed looping bottles to apparel, and ended up doing a tour with Take Three in Australia called the Talking Trash Tour from Brisbane to Sydney. And so anytime I see trash talk or whatever, I just love it because it's just so perfect, you know. So
Hmm.
tell us a little
Hmm.
bit about this trash talk article. It looks, so this was in Home in Canada.
Yeah. So that's a magazine. And they interviewed, I think, four different people or groups that are focused on waste reduction. So it's kind of nice. Like, when I first started Greener Future, I had no idea what zero waste was or the whole movement. I didn't take any extra steps to be like more of an environmental person, really. I just, I cared about nature, but I didn't really think too deeply about my own actions. But once I started picking up garbage, I was picking up things that I recognized. So when I was a kid, my mom would always put Dunkaroos in my lunch. And I remember picking up a Dunkaroo package that a squirrel had like chewed all apart. And I was like, man, this could have been one of mine, right? Like, who
Yeah,
knows?
you could have even thrown it in the bin, but somebody could have knocked it over,
Exactly.
and I think that's why cleanups are so great. Even though I don't like cleanups at all personally, but I love them because they're so confronting,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
especially for that person that got dragged along by the person who really does care and does it every week.
Yeah.
Um, it really, like you're saying, like, you know, you all of a sudden you find a Dungaroo package and you're like, I used to have that every day in lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother actually works in the food industry, and when we were kids, Oscar Mayer happened to be one of the lines for the company she worked for, so we got Lunchables. Can you
Mm-hmm.
imagine like how, like, nowadays, like how
Yeah.
bad that thing,
Oh,
just the
I know.
process of the food, you know, how much plastic is probably in that cheese and meat, and
Yeah.
then packaging, and just the waste that was generated just by something that was marketed as the quick, easy lunch for your kids, and
Yeah.
it's supposed to be
Yeah.
balanced. And it's like, no.
Yeah. 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 So like now that I'm more aware and I'm very conscious about what I buy, um, we've reduced our household waste by a lot. And we technically live like a zero waste lifestyle, although you can never really get to zero. But I think the most important thing is that every time we do have garbage, we look into like, what are alternatives to this? And like, is there a way that we could get this in bulk, or is there a different product that has more sustainable packaging? And just really analyzing what we're bringing into our home,
Mhm.
and like buying things secondhand when we can, or really taking care of the things we have so that we're not constantly throwing things out.
It's yeah, and it's kind of funny. The whole zero waste movement is really just simple things. You know, like bulk food stores. It's not that hard, right? And
Yeah.
use every usable packaging. You know, buying things secondhand. I mean, everyone's complaining about fast fashion. I don't think I've bought anything new in years, and it's probably just because I'm broke and I work in conservation. You know, I
Yeah.
can afford $100 for a pair of shorts,
Hmm.
or it's always at like a clearance outlet where, you know, it was overstock and it's anyway, and it was going to go in the trash if it didn't go to these things.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's just
Yeah.
really simple steps. And I also loved your comment there about there's actually in reality no zero waste.
Yeah.
So you do get a lot of people in the influencer marketing side who, you know, promote this zero waste thing, and it's really it's a false reality. You
Yeah.
know, let's get realistic here. And as well, I've run into a bunch who claim this zero waste lifestyle and like will show their trash jar and such, but they only put things in there that they physically purchased. And they're actually people that like will just always borrow or use or ask somebody else or get somebody else to buy something for them. And like, oh, it doesn't count because I'm not the consumer. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
you are consuming. You just
Yeah.
purchased
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. And like, this isn't something that we push on to our friends and family. We just hope that they get inspired by us. So like, there's lots of instances where, well, not so much right now, but where we'd have family over and they would bring us things like whether it's a cake or cookies or, a coffee or tea, and it's not zero waste, but we're not going to scold them for thinking of us, right?
Exactly. And that's another thing I think that with your mentality and with, you know, friends and family and such, I really resonate with, because we're not extremists, you
Hmm.
know, we're not finger pointers. And I think that that's probably the most conversations I do have with people. Just because you work in this realm, they imagine that you're going to be a banner waver, and it's like, not really. I mean, you can make your own choices. I mean, we just work on it. That's just my job, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And if you want me to open up the floodgates, I'll write you a whole list on what you could have done, but there's no point, you know.
Yeah.
You
Exactly.
already know once you bring over something that is waste, or you're like, oh, well, don't show him the plastic. You know, you walk into somebody's house and they'll be like, hide the plastic bags, and you're like, well, you obviously have. You feel a little shame about it, so just change your ways. You don't
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
have. I'm
Exactly.
not going to point my finger at you. So you ended up making the media with your wedding as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Originally, we wanted to have our wedding in Prince Edward Island because we wanted to do it far away so we wouldn't have to invite a lot of people. Um, but it turned out really environmentally friendly anyways, because PEI is actually very eco-friendly. Because they're an island, they have to be very conscious of the waste they're producing. That was the hotel that we stayed at. It was the first place I've ever seen compost in the room. Like they had a compost bin in the room.
Nice.
So yeah, we just made it really simple. We planted trees instead of having bouquets of flowers, which we got from the local nursery for free. We just tried to make it as minimal as possible, and which ended up saving us a lot of money as well, and a lot of worry and headaches and planning too.
You went to an all-you-can-eat buffet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
This is
That way we didn't have to figure who was having what, and like it just made it way easier.
this is the classiest Canadian wedding I've ever seen. So I think we're gonna share all of these links when I put this video up.
Awesome.
At first, I was kind of like, "Oh, this is just gonna be a fun one about your wedding," but this is like, I think my favorite article so far.
And yeah, so like the cups were our wedding favors, and they were also you'd refill them at the bar so that we weren't using plastic cups, and then everyone could take them home after. So
just simple stuff. I mean,
yeah.
and that's why I think this is great. I mean, all of these steps that you took can be translated into anything. It
Oh
doesn't have
yeah.
to be a wedding, but I love that because we do see that these things that the world has marketed to us as these days or what you're supposed to do, they don't have to be like that. We all have choices, and you just took the simple choices to do something different. And actually, I guess it was last year, and now that I've moved home, like it's weird the culture shocks that go on. But I was back in the South Pacific a couple different times last year, and in November I was back in Fiji for the whole month. I came home and it's Christmas time, or gearing up for Christmas, and just the waste footprint, like the Hallmark holidays and all this crap that we do not need.
Hmm.
It's so, yeah, it's really bad.
It is.
Hard to
Yeah.
take because you come back after seeing people with so little, and all of this stuff washing up on shores of, and it's just this indulgent, convenient culture led society, and you don't want to point a finger, but I just kind of go into a little hole for about a month whenever I come back, and just kind of can't really talk to anyone. And then they're
Yeah. Yeah.
inviting you over for Christmas, and you're like, this is awkward.
Yeah.
It's just like consume, 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 and it's like, can we just have like a nice family dinner somewhere, or go to an
Exactly.
buffet so they don't throw a bunch out?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it can be challenging, and that's something that I've actually noticed having a son,
Yeah.
because everyone wants to buy him presents, and he really doesn't need any more toys. So
Well,
it's one of those things, like it's hard to get around.
and there's also like there doesn't need to be any more toys made because they're already there, So if you
Yeah,
want to get in the toy, go to like the secondhand store, or
yeah,
actually, I met a guy at an innovation, the Canadian government's innovation hub, who started a recycled kids' clothing and toys subscription box. So people, like, they could actually collect everyone's sort of secondhand clothes or toys, and then you sign up, and whatever age your kids are, every month or quarterly, whatever you sign up for, you actually get new supplies,
that's
um,
awesome.
toys, and you can just keep it in this nice little circular economy. And uh,
Yeah, yeah,
even though that whole system was set up for people that are inventing alternatives to waste plastic or waste plastic processing utilities, he just kind of, it was a free seminar, so he wanted to just kind of be in the mix, and I loved it. It's a great idea. Kind of subscription boxes kind of hit. They just got flooded, and I even had a swing at a zero waste one a couple of years ago, but again, not being a business person or a marketer, it just failed miserably. I was like, the idea was for it to sponsor projects in the developing islands, but you still need to make the sales for
yeah,
the proceeds
yeah.
to be there.
It's tough.
But, but yeah, it was just such a great idea because it goes, like, I just see kids as these monsters of consumption if you let them,
Hmm.
because they don't know,
Yeah,
they'll just like plow through anything.
yeah, exactly.
So but Blitz made the news. This looks like a great article. At least we don't really need to press play on there, but yeah, if anyone wants to learn more about the Butt Blitz campaign, looks like a great article here. And who is this? Is this what's CHCH?
So that's Hamilton.
Okay.
So just outside of Toronto, we actually partnered with the city,
Okay.
So I find that that's one of the most valuable things about running these programs year after year. As we get more credibility and show that we can actually do it, we have more, like whether it's municipalities or cities or just other groups that want to get involved, it makes it a lot bigger and a lot easier for us to run the events when we have those partnerships. So it gives us more visibility, and then we can have more volunteers, and then we can pick up more cigarette butts. So year after year, the more, groups or locations that we have,
Mhm.
it makes the event way better.
What helps with your sponsorships? It looks like you've got a couple good relationships there that hopefully are annual. And now that you've got a couple success stories, and like you're saying, I mean, and as well the fact that you focus on Lake Ontario, you know,
Yeah,
and the 100 events, and even the supping the lake just coincides with the Butt Blitz and your Love Your Lake campaign, really. But it makes Hamilton want to get involved, and then the next town and the next town, and once like you're saying, the municipalities are involved, your success rate's just going to go up, right?
yeah, yep,
Another,
exactly.
it's just a really clear example of sticking to what your goal is, and not trying to reinvent the wheel everywhere, which was a
Yeah,
huge goal for the Run Against Plastic, was to just go across Canada and meet people like yourselves who really just get it done in this area. And they're always different. Like there's, I think it's kind of impossible to have a huge org that has an office in every town, because there's already people like you existing, and,
yeah,
and that's
yeah,
the whole
exactly.
point of it. And I think that's maybe just the Canadian mentality of we don't, we're not trying to get any glory at all. It's just more like, how do we connect, and how do we
Yeah,
work
yeah,
together?
yeah,
Then
exactly.
what's this one? You've got a notable life apparently.
Yeah. So that was an interview that I did a little while back now. But it was when I just was pretty much starting out as like more of a nonprofit, not just myself. So at the beginning, it was just me. But luckily, over the years, I've been able to expand, and now I have one employee. So there's two of us now, which is actually huge for me because it means I can achieve double what I would have been able to achieve on my own. Um,
Oh, there's so many organizations that have 40 staff doing less than you and your partner. I think the fact that okay, we've just talked about all the things that you're achieving, and it's two,
yeah,
you and one other person. And I've been,
yeah,
it's Chelsea, right?
Chelsea, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it's really inspiring to me to show that what two people can achieve.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we obviously have a lot of volunteer help. And we do have some core volunteers that do other things like write blog posts and that kind of thing. So it's a community organization. If it was just me, all of this would not have been achieved.
But it's great when it is community led, and everyone just kind of puts their hand up to be like, okay, I'll do like once a month blog or once a quarterly blog or something. And then you have your sort of core volunteers. And as you've got your years of success in returning, then you've got your network in each town, right?
Yeah.
But as far as the day to days, I mean, what frustrated me the most when I got into the conservation world, being in Suva and Fiji, you got all these international NGOs, and you'll go to an office for a meeting with somebody. I'm not going to shame or name anyone, but when you have 45 staff and 3 different offices on one street, and you're like, wow, 30 of you are making tea and getting the cupcakes for lunch.
Yeah.
And that's donor dollars, whether it's
Yeah.
a foundation that gives annually, or it's an endowment fund that they've built up over the years and they're working off the interest. But why are 30 people collecting a wage to make tea and get cupcakes when there's so many people that are ready to work and have the passion, and they're going to put in the 10, 12 hours a day just because of passion? But why not compensate them so they can keep going? Because you get a lot of burnout in
Yeah.
whatever it is with not-for-profit and charity. Just people can only sustain for so long if they can't pay the rent. you know
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that we're really fortunate with here, because I've never had an office, because we do our cleanups all over the place. It didn't really make sense for us to have an office, especially when it was just me. I could work from home. So that's one less bill that we've had to pay. We've been
well, it's like
very fortunate.
office parking, power.
Yeah,
It's nowadays,
exactly.
I mean, with a mobile phone, a laptop, and wherever you live, you can have a little alcove. I mean, this is my office.
Hmm. That's
And
awesome.
and also, even with Plastic Oceans International, they don't have an office, and it's only, I think, for the US office that they call international, it's 3 people.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
and then there's a lot of contractors and other things going on making the films and the documentaries and such and educational material, but it's really only 3 people. So you don't need to waste all this money. You can make sure it goes into what
Exactly.
the goal is. I guess, I mean, you've got so much going on, but we're going to go for a quick little walk through your social channel, and then we'll probably wrap it up with just the links on this video and the Spotify channel if people want to learn more, because I think it all just speaks for itself. And
Mhm.
I love wrapping it up, the fact that it is just you and Chelsea, and then, yeah, everyone can get involved and do their part, but there is no need. I mean, this is disgusting to me. And this is, I was a smoker, so, but I
Yeah.
never tossed them out, even as a young age when I started smoking at 16 badly. But yeah, and then sailing all the time, there's always a little tin, you
Yeah.
know. So to think that in 2020 that you're still picking up this many butts.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So when I did my own mini butt blitz last Saturday, I walked down the main street that's by my house.
Hmm.
And I walked for a couple hours and I picked up 2,800 cigarette butts,
Is that this one?
and I didn't even put a dent in what I saw on the road. I guarantee there was at least a million on the street.
Is that this bag here?
No, so that was actually from last year. That's the total butts that we picked up in like Oshawa, Hamilton, Toronto, just basically all the GTA before we sent them into TerraCycle.
Yeah. And I saw on that one video, I think it was the news little bit, it was showing what happens with the cigarette butts with TerraCycle after. I saw you were holding up one of the pallets if people don't know. Or they can go to TerraCycle themselves and see what happens with cigarettes
Yeah, yep.
in that product. But is there anything else you wanted to sort of add about either your organization or just sort of, I mean, people in general? I mean, what I guess your final words would be?
Yeah, I mean, I think every action counts. And especially like for me in my life, I look back at where I was before I started A Greener Future, and I feel like I was a completely different person. I actually originally went to school for fashion marketing. So I made it.
That's why you got such a clean website, and I.
Yeah, so I didn't like working in the fashion industry, and I found it very wasteful. So that's why I made that switch. But it's all a learning experience. You know, you can't do better if you don't keep learning.
Exactly.
And for me, every day I try to keep learning and teaching my son and trying to make things better. And I hope that when I look back another 10 years from now, I think, wow, I've improved even more since then. So I think that's what's most important, is that we just keep trying and moving forward, and remembering that every little action counts.
Yeah, and I just hope that we can all evolve, like with hopefully you work yourself out of a job where you don't have to be cleaning up your lake every year and quantifying that hopefully it can evolve into something else.
Yeah, oh,
Um,
for sure.
but at the end of the day, if you and a close group of friends, if that's something that we have to do for the rest of our lives, you do it well. So keep getting it done. But yeah, thanks for connecting. And we definitely, as soon as we're allowed to travel, we look forward to finally getting to Ontario and doing something with you in person. But
Yeah,
I guess I'll stop recording now and we can say goodbye properly outside. But thanks
yeah.
for being on board and showing us everything that you're getting up to.
Thanks for having me.
No problem.